Representative Price, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first just want to thank you for the afternoon that my office staff and I spent with you at your headquarters. I know that in your offices it was kind of intimidating probably for some of your folks to see our office come in, and I think it was, I don't know if you viewed us as the cat or the dog either, but it was interesting and eye-opening, and I think that a lot of folks view the UIL as athletics only because that's where the headlines seem to be often, centered. But you do a tremendous job with your non-athletic involvement with the school children across the state, and I think that was evident in all the evidence that you've got highlighted in the pictures on the walls and everything that you've got in your offices. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for being so generous with your time. But I kind of want to focus on a couple of areas, just ask a few questions about physicals and brain health, because Dr. Schwartner mentioned that earlier today, and that was something that I'm interested in, and we talked about it, but I just wanted to get your opinion. Sunset staff had theirs, but yours is going to be a little more detailed. But in reference to athletics, should pre-participation physicals include assessment of cardio or neurological functions? And the reason I ask that is, one is, as you said, Dr. Brydup, sometimes you need a baseline to know if you're making any progress in the future. And secondly, some of the feedback we've received in our office from constituents across not only our district but the state has centered on those areas. So I'd be interested to know what your opinion is in that area.
Well, we've taken most of our opinion from our medical advisory committee, who has consistently stated that they did not believe that requirement of an ECG or an EKG for a student to participate should be mandatory. They have indicated that it certainly should be something that a local school district could. And we've had a lot of folks that have lobbied us. Scott Stevens is here today, and he may even testify, and has a really good story, and it's a compelling story, and it's one that we really looked at. What is the cost of that for the students, and should that even be a factor? Does it make a difference to have that pre-screening done? And there is some research that our medical advisory committee has looked at. And again, we have an expert here who's a cardiologist on our committee that you might ask that question of in a moment. Dr. Harrison.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you. I am here, and I've loved the tone of this meeting today regarding the health, safety, and welfare of our students. That's what I'm about. My son was Cody Stevens. He played football in Crosby, Texas. He had a physical every year and had an underlying heart issue that we had no idea about. 3 weeks before his high school graduation, my 6'9", 290-pound son, getting ready to go play college football, walked by me and said, "Son, Dad, I'm going to take a nap. I'm tired." He didn't wake up. I didn't have any idea they had a heart issue, didn't know what to do for about 6 weeks, walked into walls and hitting the floor and figuring out what in the world to do about it. Then I heard about a school district just up the road from us, Huffman, that screened their kids with an EKG as part of their sports physical. I heard about a young man named Chris Aguilar, that Chris Aguilar had that heart screening. Chris Aguilar went into open heart surgery, and Chris Aguilar graduated this year, 2 years after my son passed away. I believe that Texas can be a leader in this issue. I believe that we can make excuses all day long about why not to do it. Here's what I'm doing. We've raised over $300,000 through the Cody Stevens Go Big or Go Home Memorial Foundation. We've been a part of screening 30,000 kids in the last 2 years. It can be done. I believe that I need help from Big Brother. That's why I'm here today. I'm loud and I can get around, but I need you guys to put this on the agenda and get something done about it. Twice in an athlete's career is not too much to spend $15 for an EKG. 80% of the kids that die of sudden cardiac arrest have had no pre-warning signs. 80%. A system that relies on a pre-physical where you ask questions, are you having problems, and it's self-reporting, is broken. It is broken. Do you take your car to a mechanic and say, listen to it? No, you ask your mechanic, put it on the computer, see what the computer says. I want my son's heart on that EKG. I believe he'd be here today. I got a letter from, I got an email from a mother in Cy-Fair whose daughter had this done. I will forever be indebted to Dr. DeBosch and Cypress ECG for what they did for Shayla. She had numerous physicals, doctor's appointments, etc., but nobody ever said anything about a heart problem until she had an EKG at school. If I had to go to a doctor and pay for this test, I would not have done that because I had no reason to believe there's anything wrong with her. She runs, tumbles, and has cheered for years. We've never had any indications of any problem. Because of the EKG test, she has undergone successful open heart surgery and is expected to live a full, healthy, normal life, including cheering this year. We had 9 of those students we screened this year. We had 9 heart surgeries. 9. That's 9 souls that I believe will grow into adulthood and make a difference in our communities. It's just too easy not to do it. It's the right thing to do. We've got 50 school districts that I've talked to that are doing it. I've got 6 hospitals that said we'll do it for free. I've got a group that'll go statewide, do it for $15. I need your help.
Wow. I am so sorry about your son, and I am in such awe and respect for parents who take a pain like that and turn it into a positive. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being here. Representative Price?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stevens, I'm sorry I walked in right when you were beginning your testimony.
Yes,
so
sir.
you stated a number that I wanted to hear again. I just want to make sure I understand about how many folks you all are screening, or maybe annually was the number.
Well, in 2 years, I say I've been a part of screening 30,000 kids. We have found about 4% of those have an underlying heart issue they at least need to know about. This last year, one group, Cypress ECG Project, screened 12,660 kids. We paid for a lot of those. School districts paid for a lot of them. Rotary clubs paid for a lot of them. Anyway, the bottom line is it cost $15. 21 of those 12,000 students.
Cost $15?
$15.
Okay.
21 of those students were labeled high risk. 9 of those 12,000 went into heart surgery. And again, I've got 5 other hospitals out there that are doing it.
How many can y'all screen, or in your experience, how many of y'all screen in a day?
Well, Representative Turner was kind enough to carry this as a bill last legislative session, and I went to him. I said, I want to say thanks for trying. And we didn't get it done. We didn't get it out of committee. But pick a school district that will screen for free in your honor. He picked Aldine, 5 high schools. We screened 1,000 kids that day, one day.
Wow. It's incredible. It's impressive. Thanks for what you're doing.
Representative Dutton, you were next.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stevens, I want to make sure I understand. Are you asking the legislature to consider requiring these tests to be done? Is that correct?
That's correct.
As a part of the physical that they have every year?
The ideal situation would be that you would do it at least twice in the athlete's career. First year and
high
third
school
year.
career? Not through
Middle school,
Middle
I think.
School, okay.
What I've heard is the year before puberty and the year after puberty is ideal.
Okay, and then are you asking that the state fund this, or just that it's required and the school districts figure out whether they charge the students, or what's your theory behind that?
Well, I do have a lot of theories on that, but I will tell you that we do not fund school physicals now as a state.
Right.
One of the fears, of course, from schools is don't give me another unfunded mandate. Tell me now where we're telling you to do physicals and we're giving you money for it. We're not. Yeah. So I'm asking for an enhancement to the physical. And I'm telling you that there are solutions out there. There are hospitals that are into preventative care that want to cover their neighborhoods.
Right.
There are Rotary clubs that say, I'm going to cover my district. There are foundations like the Cody Stevens Foundation. Mm-hmm. There are answers. I will tell you that I have done a study on school budgets between 1A and 5A, knowing how many we typically screen. Mm-hmm. It works out to 0.0003% of their school budget. If you're a superintendent making $200,000 a year, it's like you gave $60 to that program. It's not an expensive deal. Yet it could be a very much a lifesaver.
Wouldn't, and I don't know this, Mr. Chairman, so you might know, wouldn't UIL have the ability to require that themselves as a rule? I mean, couldn't they make a rule to why do we need legislation or something like that?
And that's a great question. I started out going to the UIL Medical Advisory Committee 5 months after my son died. I went in September of 2012 and spoke. And much like this room, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And then when I finished speaking, it was suggested that they meet again in 6 months, but if they didn't have anything to talk about, they didn't need to meet. And I looked at my wife and I said, we're going to need a bigger boat. Yeah. And I went to the Legislative Council the next month on what would have been my son's 19th birthday. And that group of superintendents heard me. They did hear me. They want to do something. They want to protect their kids. They devote their lives to those kids. They formed an ad hoc committee, and the UIL was involved in that. Medical advisors was involved in that. They brought in some outside doctors onto that ad hoc committee, and they came out with a sudden cardiac awareness form that goes to 600,000 student athletes in the state of Texas. It's signed by the students. It's signed by their parents. Here's what sudden cardiac arrest is. Here's what to do if you see an event. Here's groups that are screening. And I think they've now revised that, take that part of it off. But it was a good form. But I'll tell you this. The second district I went to after Crosby, to get Crosby to screen after my son died, was Sheldon ISD, C.E. King. And C.E. King made the decision that, yes, we're going to do something. We are going to do something. We think it needs to be done. We're going to screen. We're going to work with Memorial Hermann, and our ninth graders can go to Memorial Hermann Clinic and get a free EKG. Wonderful program. Our program is we come into the school, we do it where the students are, we take them out of class, we get them done, and the percentages are just so much higher. Well, I can tell you, Amy Gonzalez was a junior at C.E. King. Amy Gonzalez was a softball player, wasn't a freshman, didn't get the free test. She died on May 25th. Unless we catch all these kids, and my motto is screen them all, you're not going to catch those kids. Similar situation, Gilmer, Texas, lost Desmond Pollard this last spring. I called Gilmer after he died. I knew the trainer at Gilmer. He's very proactive, wants to do some things. Ran it up the flagpole at the school. I said, you're a 1A school. You're paid for. Just tell your kids to show up and get an EKG. You're paid for. They turned it down. I either need a law or I need a rule.
I got you.
And I'm not getting the rule.
Right. Now,
I've already been turned down on that.
Have they explained to you why they're not getting the rule?
Well, I think you're going to call Dr. Fenrich up here in a second as a resource, and I think he'll tell you that the medical infrastructure is not there.
Okay.
I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a grassroots guy running around doing 30,000 screenings in 2 years.
So you're looking you're looking for us, if the UIL won't do it, to require that it be done.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, very sorry for your loss, but I appreciate your passion. I know exactly how that is.
Thank you.
I believe Dr. Buckingham had some questions for you.
Yeah.
Well,
my name is Dr. Arnold Fenrich. I go by Arnie. I'm a pediatric cardiologist who specializes in electrophysiology.
awesome. Thank you. Dr. Cunningham?
Thank you. I mean, and you kind of heard everything, and I guess my question is, I know as an ophthalmologist, I don't feel comfortable listening to hearts. And so, and we just had a kid from Lake Travis who's actually a track athlete at SMU who died her freshman year. So this is kind of close to my heart as well. So can you enlighten us a little bit on what's really feasible? Is it, what tests would we need to detect these things?
Right. Currently, there's a lot of debate on whether ECG screening is would be a benefit to add to the current pre-participation history and physical. There are studies out there that suggest it is, and there are studies that suggest it is of no benefit. All those studies are not properly powered with control groups to be able to really answer that question. I can tell you that there's now a national database that's been implemented for all sudden cardiac death occurrences in children, to collect all that data throughout the country. Each state decides whether they will whether they will be involved with this national database. I've contacted the Health and Family Health Division of the state of Texas, Tammy Sajak, and have not heard back from her yet. I did get an email saying that the state of Texas is probably not going to be involved with that. And I wanted to encourage us to be involved with that. We need to answer the question first is, what's the incidence of sudden cardiac death in children? And then how can we appropriately identify it and prevent it? And I can tell you that in the meantime, the UIL has implemented the AED program throughout the state and all the high schools. And that is what the Medical Advisory Committee has recommended in the interim until we know the answer for the ECG screening. And I can tell you from personal experience, I take care of a 9-year-old boy who at 6 years of age was playing in the gym at his mother's school. She's a school teacher in an elementary school, and they happened to have an AED. He passed out playing in the gym. A teacher's aide saw this and said, "Wow, that doesn't look right." Ran and grabbed the AED, put it on him. He was in ventricular fibrillation and successfully shocked him out with no neurologic damage. And he has an internal defibrillator now and is doing very well. So at this point in time, we don't have the answer as far as whether the ECG screening would provide benefit or not, but I can wholeheartedly tell you that if we do determine that that is important, then I'm not going to be sitting here saying we need to do it for all athletes. I'm going to be asking you to approve this for all children. Why should the athletes receive special recognition when the incidence of sudden cardiac death in children is just as high in the non-athletes, if you take total numbers, as in the athletes?
Dr. Cunningham, do you have any other questions? No. What's the, I don't want to say ideal, but the optimum age at which to test children for this?
Well, there's no optimum age.
That's 6-year-olds.
Right. So currently there's pulse ox screening that's being done throughout the state in newborns. That's looking for cyanotic congenital heart disease. As far as the age of other things that may result in sudden cardiac death, a number of the causes can be things that are progressive. So you can't just test it necessarily at one age to rule out or rule in everything. So that's why the pre-participation history and physical, at least the physical is done every 2 years and the history is done every single year.
Right. Dr. Schwartz?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Do you know the false positive rate for the EKG screening for congenital abnormalities?
It depends on who's interpreting the ECG and what
Correct.
criterion they use, but it's about 5 to 10%.
And each one of those individuals that were to have a false positive would then be referred on for cardiac ultrasound and cardiac evaluation, probably.
Correct.
Right. So you would have a lot of individuals that would be going through the medical regimen without really... sensitivity test is only so good, and you're telling me the EKG test for this abnormality, this condition, is not the test we need to be implementing for athletics in the state of Texas at this time.
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Woodley, go ahead.
Hello,
Thank you,
I'm
Doctor.
John Woodley, and I wanted to bring up some issues with UT concerning discrimination and the policy for excuse me, and the policies to resolve the issues are inadequate, and many of the disability issues are not being addressed. They're being denied. And I'm not really prepared to speak today, but I've never been before a meeting like this before. And I would like to see some policy changes at UT to get people with disability better accommodation. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here who wishes to testify?
Question, Madam Chair.
Senator, Representative Dutton.
Yes, the doctor. And I'm just trying to understand your last point that you made to Dr. Schwartner. You said, tell me again, we aren't at a stage where we can actually test or rely on an EKG? Or
We clearly can do ECG testing, whether we can do it in a comprehensive manner throughout the state with enough people to really interpret them, and then have a pediatric cardiologist evaluate all those that need to be evaluated, either because they're a true positive or a false positive, which would be about 5 to 10%. But the real question really comes before that. Is there really? We don't have the answer to whether that's an important piece to the pre-participation screening process. at this point in time. I'd love to have the answer to that, and the goal nationally is that we get there.
How would you get the answer to that, though?
Well, I just mentioned that there's a national database now for sudden cardiac death occurrences in children that all states, I feel, should participate in sending information to first establish what is the incidence, and then from there we might be able to establish what's the best method for determining how to screen for this.
So, when we heard the testimony of the gentleman whose son passed away, they said they've been testing 30,000 students, and they tested 1,000 students in one day. Does that? Did I hear that right?
That's what he said. Yes.
You don't think that was possible or something?
Well, when you're talking about the total number of students that are, and again, we're talking athletes, unless we want to talk the entire student body. The total number of student athletes is probably, in the state of Texas, is approaching 1 million. So that would be a far greater number than 1,000 ECGs. And again, I think that we need to, if ECG screening is important and will help save lives in children, then let's do it for everybody, not just the athletes. Why should it just be the athletes?
Well, how about drug testing? You think we ought to drug test all the students too?
I think you're talking specifically about the current steroid testing policy.
No, just drug testing, period.
I think that's certainly not my area of expertise, but I think it would be reasonable to be explored.
You sound like a member of the legislature. Because I'm trying to figure out, we were so committed to doing the drug testing, but here we are now doing a diagnostic testing, but we have all these skeletons that seem to jump up and say we shouldn't do it, and I'm not convinced about either one, to be honest, but I think we ought to apply the same standards to both.
I'm not sitting here telling you we shouldn't do an ECG. I'm just telling you that at this point in time, the data is not there to support it.
Well, we don't have a lot of data to support some of this drug testing, and I say again, that sort of causes me a little bit of hesitation about any of this, because the drug testing clearly that we did for steroid testing ended up, I can't remember the number. The number was so small that it was statistically almost zero. But we're going to do it anyway, because there's this assumption that because we do it, it won't happen, or children won't do it. Well, I don't know, but if I apply that same standard to ECG testing, what you're saying is there may be no benefit to doing the ECG testing.
I never said there'd be no benefit. I said that there's a significant number of false positives. I can also tell you that only about 50% of the those that have a condition that might put them at risk will be picked up. So you have to keep in mind that there's no screening process that will be 100%. And clearly the ECG screening process will not be 100%. There still will be kids who will die suddenly, even if they've had an ECG screening.
But that doesn't mean we ought not do it, though.
I agree with you wholeheartedly with that, but I think we need to know whether it does reduce the risk of sudden death or not. I don't know the answer to that, and I assume no one here does either, because there isn't that data.
Exactly. And so, but the other point I think you're making is that the false positives, I don't know what the false positives are for drug testing, but I'm assuming, like you said, that it's not 100%. So there must be some false positive related to that.
I don't know the data well enough to help you on that. Sorry.
But I didn't hear anybody testify they would not do it because they're false positives. And I can almost guarantee you, like you said, that it certainly generates false positives, but that's not a bar to us considering even doing it. And so here we are, again, talking about saving children's lives, that yet the arguments seem to be contradictory, yet it's about the same issue, for me at least, anyway. And maybe we don't get it. You're electrophysiologist?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume that means you deal a lot with heart arrhythmias and stuff like that, right?
I do. I evaluate and treat children with heartbeat issues.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be
You're
here.
welcome.
To everyone who testified.